A Dash of Death, a Mick and Mack mystery. Welcome back to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. I'm Jay Nickel of Nickel Investigations, and you're listening to another Whodunit Wednesday, where we step into the world of classic detective fiction. Go back to the golden era of detective fiction and enjoy stories in the tradition of the greats of writing, from Agatha Christie to Raymond Chandler to John Creasy. These are short stories I hope you enjoy. A sizzling chef, a perfect dish, a fatal garnish. It was supposed to be a feast for the senses, a live cooking demonstration in Toronto's lively Kensington Market, headlined by celebrity chef and culinary heartthrob Giancarlo Moretti. But when the flamboyant chef takes a bite of his own masterpiece and drops dead on the stage, it's up to detectives McCathie and MacNeely to find the killer behind the cutting board. Hello, I'm Jay Nickel of Nickel Investigations, and this is Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Ontario Cold Cases is a gripping true crime podcast that shines a light on unsolved murders, disappearances, and forgotten crimes from across the province and the world. With meticulous research, compelling storytelling, and a commitment to historical accuracy, we bring you the real stories of victims, investigators, and suspects. Stories that demand to be heard. Each week, we take you deep into the world of true crime with a packed schedule of episodes. Tuesdays, historical true crime cases, exploring infamous and obscure crimes from history. Wednesdays, the Mick and Mack mysteries, a thrilling fictional detective series set in 1950s Toronto. Thursdays, World Cold Case Thursday, investigating unsolved cases from around the globe. Sundays, Ontario Cold Cases, the latest episode uncovering an unsolved mystery from Ontario. From high-profile crimes that shock the nation to little-known cases waiting for justice, we uncover the truth, one case at a time. Join us as we explore the dark corners of history and mystery, where every clue could lead to answers and every case deserves a second look. Subscribe now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and never miss an episode of Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Chapter 1. Death a la carte. Kensington Market was alive with noise, color, and the smell of a dozen different cuisines trying to outdo each other. Sausages sizzled on open grills, fishmongers hollered in half a dozen languages, and someone somewhere was playing a trumpet just slightly out of tune. "Smells like trouble," Mick muttered, wrinkling his nose as he sidestepped a cart stacked with garlic ropes and questionable optimism. "Ah, it smells like heaven," Mac replied, already eyeing a pyramid of glistening food. "This place is a carnival for your nose. You gotta let it have some fun." Mick glanced over. "My nose likes quiet cafes and burnt coffee, not markets that smell like 12 countries just got into a food fight." Before Mac could answer, a voice rang out over a tinny loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Passion on the Plate cooking demonstration hosted by the one and only Chef Giancarlo Moretti." A cheer rose from the crowd gathered in front of the makeshift stage, built out of old crates and cafe tables. On top of it stood a man in a white double-breasted jacket, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hair slicked back like a matinee idol, and a smile that could have melted butter, which he was already doing, loudly and theatrically, in a copper sauté pan. "Ah, the smell of sizzling garlic and wine," he called. "What is life without a little fire in the pan, eh?" Mac leaned closer to Mick and whispered, "I love this guy. I heard he once flambéed a duck so hard it set off the fire alarms at the King Eddie." "He sounds like a menace," Mick replied flatly. The crowd laughed and clapped as Giancarlo pirouetted with a ladle, adding cream with a flourish. Beside him stood a table of ingredients, herbs, flowers, cheeses, spices, and a young apprentice furiously chopping parsley like his life depended on it. Mick's eyes wandered across the front row. A striking woman in a wide-brimmed hat and opera gloves was watching the chef with rapt attention. Her lips were painted the exact color of a ripe pomegranate, and her gaze never left Giancarlo. "That one's not just hungry for pasta," Mick muttered. Mac squinted. "Fan or stalker?" "Probably both," Mick said. "Keep an eye on her." Giancarlo was reaching the finale now, searing a veal medallion in cognac, then garnishing it with a delicate purple flower. "This," he said, raising the plate high, "is not just food. It is amore." The crowd cheered. He bowed theatrically, then took a small bite of his masterpiece, and froze. His face twitched. The plate slipped from his hand, shattering on the stage. He clutched his chest, staggered back 2 steps, and collapsed. For a moment, the crowd thought it was part of the show. Then the foam bubbled from his lips, and someone screamed. Mick and Mack were already moving, pushing through the crowd as panic erupted. Mack knelt beside the chef, still breathing, but barely. Mick stood up and barked, "Somebody get a doctor, and nobody leaves this square." A voice called out from the crowd, calm and dry, "No need, I'm already here." Dr. Kendall, the city's ever sardonic coroner, emerged from behind a fruit stand holding a half-eaten peach and a coffee thermos that probably hadn't been cleaned since 1942. He bent down, checked Giancarlo's pulse, and looked up at Mick. "Well," he said, "I hope no one paid for lunch. This man's been poisoned." Chapter 2. Stirring the Pot. The ambulance had long since carried away Giancarlo Moretti's body, leaving behind a crime scene cordoned off by yellow rope and guarded by a disgruntled constable who looked like he'd rather be buying bagels. Mick and Mack stood outside a small butcher's shop just off the main drag of Kensington Market, going over notes while the afternoon sun baked the pavement. "I count at least 30 people close enough to doctor that dish," Mack said, flipping through his notepad. "Half of them waving parsley like parade flags." "Too messy to be a random poison job," Mick replied. "This was staged, personal." Just then a gentle voice cut through the air behind them. "Excuse me? Are you the detectives in charge?" They turned to find the woman from the front row, Saskia Bloom. Up close, she looked even more carefully composed. Pearls, gloves, a handkerchief clutched like it was holding her together. Her eyes were rimmed red, but dry. "I'm Saskia Bloom. I just wanted to say how devastated I am. Giancarlo, he was brilliant. He was everything." Mick raised an eyebrow. "You knew him?" "I adored him," she said softly, eyes distant. "Followed his career for years. Every demo, every recipe column. I even sent him letters. Real ones, on proper stationery." Max stepped in gently. "Did he reply?" A long pause. "Once. A postcard from Montreal. He said my handwriting was elegant, that's all. But still, he noticed me. He felt me." Mick and Mack exchanged a glance. "Where were you during the demonstration?" Mick asked. "Front row. Left side. You saw me, didn't you?" She smiled and suddenly looked down. "I would never hurt him. I was there to see him, to support him. I even brought a flower for luck." "A flower?" She pulled a crush bloom from her purse. A pale purple one, still faintly fragrant. Mick recognized it immediately. "Same flower you used to garnish the dish," he murmured. "It's called foxglove," Sasha said. "Isn't it lovely?" Mick's eyes narrowed. "It's also called digitalis. In the wrong dose, it's lethal." Sasha's smile faltered. "Oh, I didn't. I just thought it was pretty." Mick scribbled that down, and Sasha's eyes welled up and she turned away, disappearing into the crowd like a ghost dissolving into fog. Later that afternoon, Mick and Mack ducked in Trattoria Lucia, a narrow, rustic joint with red checked tablecloths, a long row of copper pans, and a palpable sense of tension. Lucia Moretti, petite, sharp-eyed, and dressed in chef whites, stood behind the counter, dicing tomatoes with the precision of a surgeon performing open heart. "You here to ask if I killed my ex-husband?" she asked before they even introduced themselves. Mac blinked. "Actually, yeah. That was next on the list." Lucia didn't stop chopping. "I should have. I would save you the trouble, but I didn't." Mick leaned on the counter. "You argued with him this morning." "I argue with everyone in this market. But yes, he wanted me to close my place and work for him again. Said we'd be unstoppable together. I said I'd rather be buried in Parmesan." "Any reason you want him dead?" Lucia finally stopped chopping and met Mick's eyes. "He stole years of my recipes, my techniques. He slapped his name on them and smiled for the camera. I didn't kill him. That would have made him a martyr. I'd rather watch his brand rot in the sun." Mick and Mack exchanged another look. Not innocent, but maybe not guilty either. Next stop, the alley behind a spice wholesaler, where Tommy Two Eggs Russo stood in a cloud of cigar smoke and cologne. A thick-set man in a camel coat and spectator shoes looked like a gangster moonlighting as a menu consultant. "Giancarlo was a pain in my neck," Tommy growled, flicking ash. "Guy owed me $600 for an imported saffron shipment. Never should have even mentioned in polite company." "Illegal shipment?" Mick asked, unimpressed. "Let's just say Border Control has poor taste," Tommy said with a wink. "That don't mean I poisoned the guy. Bad for business. Dead chefs don't order truffles." Max stepped closer. "You threatened him recently?" "I offered him a deal. Told me to stick my oregano where the sun don't shine. So yeah, maybe I got a little loud, but I didn't kill him. Besides, I was here the whole time, selling to Colette." Mick scribbled something. "That reminds me. Time for dessert." Madame Colette's supper room was a narrow, velvet-draped jewel box of a restaurant. The woman herself was seated like a queen at a side table, sipping coffee and peeling an orange with surgical grace. "He was a thief," she said simply, before they even sat down. "I taught him sauces in Paris. He took notes, then he vanished." "Did you confront him?" Mac asked. "Of course. Last week. I told him if he used my sauce one more time, I'd leave a rat in his risotto." "Any idea what he garnished today's dish with?" "A foxglove flower," she replied, unconcerned. "He stole that too. It's my signature. But I didn't kill him. I prefer humiliation to homicide. And poison is so..." Mick tilted his head. "You know a lot about it." "I'm French, detective. We know a lot about everything." That evening, back at the office, Mick and Mack sat with Dr. Kendall, who traded his thermos for something allegedly resembling tea. "Digitalis," he said, laying down the lab report. "Derived from foxglove. Not a subtle poison. Slow-acting, but unmistakable. Giancarlo had enough in his system to drop a racehorse." "Any chance it was an accident?" Mac asked. "Sure," Kendall said dryly. "If you mistook a deadly flower for seasoning, which I'd expect from a toddler, not a top chef." Mick looked out the window at the city's lights. "So," he muttered, "either someone slipped it in his dish, or handed it to him directly, knowing he used it as a garnish." Mac leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Someone who knew what he'd do, what he'd say, what he'd serve. They both thought of Saskia Bloom and the pretty flower in her gloved hand. Chapter 3. Recipe for Betrayal. Mick held the flower between thumb and forefinger, turning it in the light. A pale purple foxglove. Innocent in appearance, deadly in the wrong hands. Or perhaps the right ones. Pretty little killer, Mac said, sipping a lukewarm espresso. Grows wild in some parts of Ontario. Some chefs use it as a garnish for flair. They're trying to impress tourists or poison someone. Let's figure out where it came from, Mick muttered. Somebody didn't just grab this off a windowsill. They started back at Trattoria Lucia, which was now closed to the public. Lucia met them at the side door, wiping her hands in a flour-dusted apron. If you're here to accuse me again, make it quick. I've got dough rising. Mick held up the foxglove. You recognize this? Lucia's mouth twitched. Of course. Giancarlo was obsessed with that flower. Claimed it was his trademark. Which is ironic, since I was the one who first used it in plating, just for decoration. Where did you get yours? I used to grow it in a window box, till I read it could kill someone. She pointed toward the back alley. Toss the whole lot. Check the bin if you don't believe me. They did. Behind the trattoria, amid wilted basil, used coffee grounds, and broken egg cartons, they found it. A shriveled foxglove bloom, stained at the stem. Mick pocketed it. You tossed this when? 2 days ago, Lucia said. If I want him dead, wouldn't need flowers to do it. I'd just serve him last Tuesday's chicken. Later, Madame Colette's supper room, the French chef received them with an expression that suggested she'd rather be addressing a bucket of raw oysters. I warned you last time, detective, she said, slicing into a blood orange with alarming calm. The man was a leech, a thief of ideas, of recipes, of hearts, if you believed his press kit. You say he stole from everyone, Mick noted. Care to be more specific? He took my duck a la Colette and renamed it Volcano de Volet, she snorted. He added paprika and called it an invention. You know what he really invented? Self-promotion. Where were you during the demo? In the crowd, back left, bored, and armed with alibis. She waved toward 2 staff polishing glasses nearby. They'll tell you I never moved. I couldn't even see the man clearly through the smoke and self-importance. Mac looked around the opulent supper room. You ever use foxglove here? Madame Colette clicked her tongue. Please. I'm French. We use butter and judgment. Outside in the late-day haze of the market's winding alleys, they ran into a familiar face. Saskia Bloom. He stepped out of the shadow of a florist's stall like an understudy waiting for a cue. Her gloves were off now, her hair looser, her smile sharper. I've been thinking, she said. I believe Giancarlo knew he was in danger. Mick raised an eyebrow. You said nothing about that before. I didn't want to seem dramatic. You are dramatic. She offered a small, sad smile. It's how he liked me. What makes you think he was in danger, Mac asked. I overheard things. Whispers. People in the market. Jealous rivals. He told me once in confidence that someone wanted to ruin him. You two were close? Her eyes flickered. Closer than anyone knew. I have letters. He wrote me, often, when we were apart. May we see them? I'm not sure, she hesitated. Some of them are quite personal. Miss Bloom, Mick said gently. Someone murdered him. The closer you were, the more we need to understand. She bit her lip, nodded slowly. All right. Come by tomorrow, I'll have them ready. She turned and melted in the alleyway, leaving a faint perfume of jasmine and uncertainty. That evening at a nearby cafe turned interrogation room, Mick and Mack caught up with Julian Webb, former food critic turned self-published muckraker. He looked like a man who believed neck scars were a personality trait. I said the man was overrated. So what? He sneered, stirring his tea as if he had personally offended him. Giancarlo Moretti was a hack with a photo face and no palate. You wrote a review that got you fired, Mick said. I told the truth. His veal tasted like wet ambition. The Globe couldn't handle it. You publish your own reviews now, Mack said. Ever publish anything threatening? Webb leaned in conspiratorially. Let's just say some chefs don't like a mirror held to their ego. But I'm a writer, detectives, not a poisoner. Did you attend the demo? Webb smirked. Of course. I was there to write a real review. Pity the act ended so early. Mick narrowed his eyes. Did you notice anything unusual? Besides the murder? Only that his apprentice looked ready to boil over. Which brought them to Kenny Wu, the young chef in training who'd spent the entire demo looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. He was in the kitchen of his uncle's dim sum place, chopping scallions with military precision. I didn't poison him, he said before they asked. I just cooked. He didn't seem happy to be there, Mack said. Giancarlo was a great chef, but a terrible teacher. He yelled. He mocked. He said I'd never make it out of the prep station. Did you ever think about leaving? Kenny paused. Yes, but I wanted to prove him wrong first. He made everything a test. Mick studied him. You didn't like him. I respected his skill, not his mouth. Where were you during the incident? Kenny looked up. On stage, behind him. You saw me. Did you see anyone get near the garnish tray before you plated? A pause. Yes. One person. Mick leaned in. Who? Kenny hesitated. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat. I didn't see her face, but she stepped up just for a second. I thought she was handing him a flower. Mack and Mick exchanged a glance. Saskia Bloom. Chapter 4. Love, Lies, and Lunacy. Rain tapped the window of the office like it was trying to get in on the case. Mick sat at his desk, sorting through Giancarlo Moretti's personal effects. The box was filled with the usual showbiz leftovers, signed headshots, press clippings, cocktail napkins with phone numbers, and the man's prized leather-bound recipe journal. He flipped it open, passed sauce splatters, and scribbled notes until something fluttered out. It was a page, burned around the edges, handwritten. My dearest Giancarlo, when you cook, I can taste your soul. When you smile, I feel heat in my bones. You are a storm, and I am your thunderstruck devotee. Don't ignore what we have. Don't pretend you don't feel it too. I'm always watching, always near, always yours. Sasha. Mick raised a brow. Well, he muttered, that's not a fan letter. That's a manifesto. Just then the phone rang. Mack answered with his usual charm. Detectives, we don't do taxes, plumbing, or ghost removal. He blinked. Kenny Wu, slow down, kid. A pause. Mack covered the receiver. He says he didn't tell us everything. Mick stood. They met Kenny behind his uncle's dim sum place, under a flickering backdoor light and the smell of pork buns. I didn't want to get involved, Kenny said, tugging at his apron. But Giancarlo wasn't just working the stove. He was seeing someone again. Mick squinted. Sasha? Kenny shook his head. Lucia. Mack let out a low whistle. His ex-wife. He used to stop by her trattoria late, after service. She always told the staff to leave early on those nights. You think Lucia knew about Sasha? Kenny shrugged. I don't know. But things got tense. Lucia broke a pan once, said it slipped. Mick looked at Mack. We need to talk Lucia again. Lucia opened the trattoria door with a scowl and a towel slung over her shoulder. You two again? What now? We heard you and Giancarlo were rekindling, Mick said gently. Lucia didn't answer right away. She just crossed her arms and stared down the detectives like they were undercooked gnocchi. Fine, she said. He was coming around late, but not for romance. Let him think I was interested. I just wanted to get my hands on his new recipes, to see if he cooked up anything worth stealing. So you were stealing. Reclaiming, she snapped. Every risotto he ever made started in my notebook. Did you know about a woman named Saskia Bloom? Lucia's expression flickered. She came in once, said she was a fan, watched us like we were a soap opera, gave me the creeps. I think Giancarlo liked it. He liked being worshipped. Mack paced slowly. You jealous? I was insulted, she admitted. Not enough to kill him, but enough to hope someone would. Mick was flipping through Giancarlo's recipe journal again when something else caught his eye. A slip of folded parchment tucked between 2 pages of veal variations. He unfolded it. Too many cooks spoil the broth. One kills it. Handwritten, ink slightly smudged. Mick held it up for Lucia to see. She didn't react. Mack frowned. What does that mean? Lucia shrugged. He was always making speeches, probably practicing one of his lessons. The man never met a metaphor he didn't flambe. Back at their office, Mick was staring out the Rain Street window when Mack came in with a file from city licensing. Found something, Mack said. You know that hush-hush supper club Colette runs behind her restaurant? The Velvet Lamp place? She calls it La Chambre Noire, only for select clientele. Guess who threatened to expose it for tax evasion, health code violations, and get this, menu theft. Mick leaned in. Giancarlo, Mack said. Apparently he claimed the idea for her next invention was his. What was the invention? Mack opened his notebook and tried not to laugh. Fried potatoes with gravy and cheese curds. Mick blinked. That's a joke, right? She called it disgusting. Said frites are Belgian and I am from Paris. Could have changed the future of food, Mick said. Instead, she changed the locks. That night, Mick was reviewing old event programs and Mack snapped his fingers. That tasting event at the Ram, he said. 2 months ago. Olive oil and duck confit. Giancarlo was a headliner. Sasha was there. You sure? She wore red gloves and a fastener. I remember because she asked for an autograph and lipstick. Mick closed his notebook slowly. She's been following him for months. Saskia Bloom's apartment was exactly what he'd expect from someone who described herself as passionately devoted. It was a second-floor walk-up in Brunswick, wallpapered in floral print with velvet curtains that blocked out most of the world, and framed every room in theatrical gloom. She opened the door in a silk robe and pearls. A record was playing faintly in the background, some torch singer crooning in French about heartbreak and fire. Detective, she said with a smile just shy of nervous. Come in. Inside, the temperature felt warmer. Or maybe it was just a shrine. Giancarlo's face stared back at them from every angle. Clippings from newspapers, carefully cut and pinned. A few old menus with his name circled in red ink. A photo of him at a book signing with Sasha standing 3 people back, partially cropped, but unmistakably present. Mack nudged Mick. She's practically curated the Giancarlo Museum. I heard that, Sasha said lightly as she moved to pour tea. I don't apologize. When you love someone deeply, you want to preserve the memories, to hold on to every part of them. Mac whispered, She's got more of him than he had of himself. Mick nodded toward the walls. You collected all this? I preserved it, Sasha said calmly. We had something sacred. He may not have understood it yet, but he felt it. Were you jealous of Lucia? Her smile didn't waver. No, she was his past. I was his future. And what about this? Mick handed her the note. She read it and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. He wrote things like that, she murmured. Little notes. Messages meant for me, I think. Sometimes he'd hide them in books. He wanted me to find them. Or maybe, Mick said, he was trying to warn someone. She looked up, her eyes full of soft sadness. You don't understand. Giancarlo and I weren't just people. We were ingredients in the same dish. She sat down beside a shrine of flowers, some fresh, some long wilted. I never wanted him to die. I only wanted him to taste how much I loved him. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Inside, the kettle hissed. And Mick and Mack knew Saskia Bloom wasn't done unraveling just yet. Chapter 5. A Taste of Madness. The warehouse off Kensington Avenue was quiet after dark. Too quiet for a neighborhood that usually hummed like a hornet's nest. Inside, old fruit crates were stacked high like makeshift barricades. A string of cafe lights swayed from a rusted pipe overhead, giving everything the feel of a midnight speakeasy. Mick adjusted the lapels of his coat and surveyed the scene. A folding table being set at the center, covered in a pristine white cloth and dressed for a small, exclusive event. A plate sat in the middle, a mock dish cooked up by one of Lucia's line cooks under strict instructions. The piece de resistance, a carefully placed foxglove flower. Delicate, deadly, familiar. This will either catch her, Mac said, lighting a cigarette, or win us some very confused reviews in Toronto life. They'd sent out the bait that afternoon. Word through the market grapevine that Giancarlo's final recipe had been discovered, to be unveiled at a quiet press review for select insiders. No real reporters had been invited. Just one person. They didn't have to wait long. A few minutes past 10, the door creaked open. A figure stepped through the shadows, poised, gloved, lips painted a bruised red. Saskia Bloom. She didn't speak at first. She just walked slowly toward the table, eyes fixed on the plate, as if drawn by invisible thread. It's real, she whispered. He made this? Mick stepped from the shadows. We reconstructed it, based on notes we found in his journal. She reached toward the flower garnish, stopped, then pulled her hand back like it burned. Mac joined them, arms folded. Funny thing, that flower there looks a lot like the one he used the day he died. Her eyes flicked between the two detectives. Yes, she said softly. It's the same kind. She swallowed. I thought if I just gave him a little scare, he'd come running back. That he'd see what I meant to him. He said he felt faint around me sometimes. I thought if he fainted, if I saved him, he'd realize. Her breath hitched. I brought the antidote. I read about it. I had it ready. Where? Mick asked gently. In my purse, the green one. I left it in the back of the theater tent during the demo. I didn't think I needed to use it. I thought he'd he'd understand. Mac moved to the crate pile near the rear, where they'd found her bag earlier. He pulled it open. Inside, perfume, lipstick, pressed flower petals, and a notebook. And a small brown glass bottle. Sealed. Untouched. Sasha, Mick said. He didn't just faint. He died. I didn't mean to kill him, she cried, backing toward the table. I just want him to need me. He was going to throw me away like a garnish. Now he's a garnish, Mac muttered. Sasha's voice cracked. It was only meant to scare him, just a taste of fear, like a pinch of salt. You gave him a feast, Mick said quietly. She sank in the folding chair like a stringless puppet. Face pale, eyes wide. Mac closed the purse, handed it to Mick, and lit another cigarette. Funny thing about culinary crimes, he said, exhaling. They always leave a bitter aftertaste. Chapter 6. Bitter Aftertaste. Saskia Bloom sat in the corner of the interview room like a broken porcelain doll. Her gloves were off, her lipstick smeared, and her tear-streaked face fixed on some point far away that only she could see. I didn't want him to die, she whispered for the fourth time. I just wanted him to need me, just for one moment. Chief Bernard Stewart stood behind the glass in the observation room, arms folded. You ever seen a cleaner confession? Dr. Kendall, sipping from his dented thermos, shrugged. I've seen neater ones. This one has a poetic sort of mess to it. She poisoned him with digitalis, Mick said, arms crossed. Deadly in small doses. Mixed into a garnish like a love note and a landmine. Classic amateur's mistake, Kendall added. Too much. No taper, no titration. Whatever plan she had was baked through with fantasy. Sasha was led away quietly, still murmuring fragments of recipes and memories. Outside the night had softened. Rain had stopped. The city felt washed clean. For now. Later that afternoon, back in the heart of Kensington, Mac stood in the doorway of Trattoria Lucia, a brown paper bag in one hand and a sheepish grin on his face. Peace offering, he said, holding out the cannoli. Lucia squinted. Is it laced with sarcasm? Only powdered sugar, he said. She took it, broke off an end, and bit him with just enough flair to keep him guessing. You know, she said, a scandal like this, good for business. People love a tragedy with a wine pairing. Maybe name your next special after him, Mac offered. Pollo allo Giancarlo, served slightly overdone. Lucia almost smiled. Thanks for clearing my name. You were on the list, he said, but not the top. She raised an eyebrow. And where am I now? He opened his mouth, paused, and wisely changed the subject. Across the street, Mick was chewing thoughtfully in a slice of garlic bread, leaning against a lamppost. You know, he said, this isn't half bad. Mac did a double take. Garlic? From you? I've evolved, Mick said. A man can grow. Next thing you know, you'll be dancing in a cooking apron. I wouldn't go that far. Just then, Madame Colette strolled past, wrapped in a cloud of lavender and superiority. Mac tipped his hat. Madame, you ever consider dinner with someone who doesn't steal recipes? She raised an eyebrow like it owed her money. I prefer my meals with less chatter and more wine. She said no, didn't she, Mick asked as she walked off. Could have been a maybe, Mac muttered, in French. Back at their office, Mac stood behind the desk mixing something in a cocktail shaker with reckless abandon. I call it the detective's delight. Equal parts bourbon, espresso, orange bitters, And pickled onion brine. Mick looked horrified. That's not a drink, that's a dare. Mac poured a shot and sipped. He gagged. Detective's delight, Mac said dryly. Tastes like regret and shoe polish. Mac winced. Needs a garnish. Mick handed him a sprig of parsley from a sandwich wrapper. Don't say foxglove. They stepped back in the market just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows over stalls that were slowly shutting down for the evening. Love like that, Mick said, lighting a cigarette. Don't need seasoning. It's already cooked too long. They walked on. Behind them a vendor shouted, Fresh herbs? Nothing poisonous, I swear. And Mick and Mack vanished into the crowd. Two detectives in fedoras, leaving behind a mystery solved, and just enough garlic in the air to keep things interesting. Thank you for listening. This has been Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast.